Okay, so controller part 2. So here we're going to cover a few topics, few advanced topics, how you can set URL mapping and how we can create so-called filters. And we are going to also learn the concept of webflow. If you are familiar with Spring Framework, you probably know what webflow is, right? So here we are using a Grail version of the webflow. And then we are going to learn the concept of command object. And then we will see some miscellaneous features, logging, HTTP method restrictions, and handling duplicate form submission. Okay, so let's talk about so there is a file called the URL mappings Groovy file on the config. This is the file you can configure URL mapping. In fact, there is a default mappings that are set for every Grails application you create, even though you don't know about it. Okay, so you're going to take a look at that file in a few minutes. Okay, so here basically you can set mappings property, static mappings property, and then here you specify a bunch of mappings. Again, if you think about the Groovy syntax, this is the property, static property of this class. And this is a closure. Closure is actually set of Groovy statements, right? So you can think of each of this is in fact Groovy statement. This is a method, and this is basically named arguments. Okay, all right. Okay, so in this case, if there is a product URL, then we'd like to have a list action of the product to handle that URL. Okay, this one. If there is a URL of student, we want student controller to handle it and then probably use a default action. Okay, so we learned the concept of default action yesterday, right? Okay, and you can also actually use this syntax. So you can say, instead of actually using this named argument syntax, you can also provide closure as an argument. Okay, so so this is closure being passed as an argument. Okay, so here in this closure, we can specify controller equals teacher, action equals list. So this syntax is allowed as well. So this is the default URL mapping that is set for every Grails application that you create. So if you actually go to conf and then URL mappings.groovy file, this is what you're going to see. So in fact, the first one is pretty important. So there are in fact the three settings. So this setting is whenever there is the this notation, so there is the application context, and then the next one is considered as a controller, and after controller, the next one is considered as an action, and if there is anything else, that is going to be considered some kind of a parameter. Okay, so this $ is actually representing a variable. Okay, so the whatever value that is coming from the user, the URL, will be set into controller variable, action variable, and I should say param. Param.controller, params.action, params.id. Okay, you can also specify some constraint here, so we're going to talk about this one later on. Okay, so this is actually default setting, and then if there is a root, it will try to display index view. Index.jsp page. If there is a 500 error, it will try to display /error.jsp page. So these are the default settings that is created for every Grails application. Okay, moving forward. So we talk about this $ something that is considered as a variable. Okay. So these variables can be used in the mapping with a $ variable name. So here, if there is a mapping, if there is a mapping of product and /ID, and so any value after product will be captured as ID parameter. So that is going to be params.id. Okay. And suppose if there is something like this, block, $block, $year, $month, $day, and $ID. So if there is a URL, something like this, each of these will be captured as a params.block, meaning the value of each of these will be captured as a params.block, params.year, params.day, params.id. Okay, and you can access these values in your actions of your controller. Okay. Optional variables. Question mark at the end. Variable makes it an optional token. What it means is that if year is question mark, then it's okay. This year is optional. And same thing for this, and same thing for this, and same thing for this. Okay, but in this case, there is no question mark in each of this, right? So which means that the URL has to match each of these 5 entries. If there is no matching URL for these 5 entries, then this is not going to be used. Okay, but in this case, if you want to support various URL, so in this case block and then /2014 or something like that, if that's the only thing, that's perfectly fine, and that will be captured by this, because rest of it is in fact all optional. Okay, so if you see the default, you can see the action and ID, they are optional as well. So that's the reason, even if you get the localhost 8080 / your application / book or student, that's perfectly fine, because you don't have to specify an action. Okay, but if you remove this question mark, then action has to be specified in the URL. Otherwise, it's going to be full error. Okay. All right. Arbitrary variables. You can also pass arbitrary parameters from the URL mapping into the controller by setting them in the block path to the mapping. So in this case, whenever there is actually this URL coming in, I want to set params.year to 2013 and params.month to 5. Okay, so if you are trying to build an application that user doesn't have to specify year and month, but you want to make sure those year and month are set, then you can actually pass this block of code closure with this value set. Okay, so those are captured as params.year, params.month. So everything that comes from the user is going to be captured in the params. Okay, and as properties in the params object. Okay, so you're going to, and then you can access those parameter values, property values, through params.year, params.month, params.controller, params.action, params.id, and things like that. Okay, dynamically resolved variables. This is a bit more involved case. So instead of using hard-coded arbitrary values, hard-coded arbitrary variables, sometimes it is actually useful to calculate the name of the variable based on runtime factors. Okay? So in that case, because you can actually access the block which contains the block of code, you can actually set that up. Okay, so for example, if you want to session user that not equal, so we are basically setting true or false to eligible. Okay, so depending on the business logic, we could actually set the param value. So in this case, params.isEligible is going to be either set true or false, depending on the business logic of this. Sometimes you want to actually map your URL to view without any controller or an action involved. Okay, so that's something you can do. So here in the mapping, basically, when there is a root, I want to select a view of this index. So it will just use /views/index.jsp page. So this is why once you create the Grails application, so Grails create app, my app, and then when you run app, and when you go to localhost 8080 / my application, and then it will just choose, because it's a root, it will just choose to display index.jsp page, which basically displays that first screen you have seen. Okay, so that is possible because we have this mapping. Okay. In this case, when there is a /product URL, we want to display this product and index.jsp page. So that should be under product and index.jsp page. Or you can specify you can certainly So alternatively, if you need a view that is specific to a particular controller, so instead of the default controller, you can choose a particular controller and view as well. Okay, moving forward. So you can also map HTTP response codes to controllers, actions, and views. Okay. So when there is a 4.4, we'd like to have it to be handled by errors controller and action forbidden. When there is 4.4, we'd like to have it to be handled by this, and the same thing with this. This is actually mapping directly to views. If you want to just display right away particular view, if there is a 4.4 error, and if you want to display this GSP page, then you can set directly like this. Errors forbidden, so it's going to display the errors forbidden.gsp page. Same thing for this, same thing for this. Okay, so the wildcard is also supported. So in this case, any image with JPG file extension will be handled by this image controller. Okay, so this is the same thing as, in fact, this, right? Because you're basically capturing as name variable. That's all, right? Okay, and this one is so this one is actually immediate. It's actually images and then xyz.jpg page, but the star it handles. It could actually have a multiple subdirectories. Okay, so it's recursive. Constraints. So basically, when there is this URL coming in block, year, month, day, and ID, and it will be handled by block controllers action, show action. However, we also specify the controller constraints, meaning this year value has to match this the regular expression pattern. Okay, so it has to be 4-digit, and the month has to be 2-digit, and day has to be 2-digit. If these constraints are not met, then again it's going to be 4.4 error. Okay. Okay, named URL mappings. Sometimes, if you are using if you are actually specifying this URL in your view multiple times, or if this mapping is kind of complicated, you can actually make it as a named URL mapping. So in this case, we say named student list, and this show student will be handled by student and list. Okay, so in our GSP page, we can just say mapping student list, and that is going to actually reflect this. Okay, and so basically, when you have this, this will be replaced by this. Okay. Okay, so let's do exercise 1. So basically URL mapping. Okay, so here we are going to create the controller 2.app, and we are going to create student domain class, as we have done before many times, and then we are going to generate all controller and views. So we are going to perform generate all or generate controller and views. Okay, and then we are going to run the application. Okay. Now let's take a look at the default mapping. So if you go to URL mappings.groovy file, so config and URL mappings.groovy file, you are going to see this. Okay, so this is a default URL mapping for every Grails application you create. So in this case, if you actually see an example of this, so if you have controller 2 app, that's the name of the application, and then this is the URL. So student and index. So in this case, the student will be captured as as a controller, and the index will be captured as an action. Now, if you have student show and 2, so there are in fact the 3 tokens in this URL, right? So in this case, student will be captured as controller, show is going to be captured as action variable, and then 2 is going to be captured as an ID. Okay, so you can access these things using, for example, params.controller, params.action, and params ID. Okay, so these 2 will be the value of params ID. Okay, all right. Okay, so that is a default. So we are going to modify students controller.groovy file, and we are going to actually add before interceptor, and we want to display the params, meaning the things coming from the client. Okay, so every time any method of the student controller gets invoked, we'd like to display the params, meaning contents of params, all the properties of params, meaning the things that are coming from the client. Okay. So let's try to create a student. So if you create a student, and so in that case, yeah, create a student, Tom Jones 22, and then what you're going to observe is this. So yeah, so this is probably from previous exercise. So here, age 22, name is Tom Jones, create action is save, and format null, and controller is oh, okay, so I think, yeah, so this is the one. Probably ID equals 2, and show is oh, sorry about that. So when you create a Tom Jones, this is actually the request for creation, and then once it's created, then it's going to display. It's actually redirection, right? So so age 22, so this params.age, params.name, params.create, params.action, params.controller, and all that stuff. Okay, so you can observe all the values that are coming from the client. Let's try listed students. Okay, so in this case, listed students is going to be, action is going to be index, controller is going to be student. Okay, all right, and set the arbitrary variables like this, and then again you're going to observe that arbitrary variables, month and year is set to 2013 and 5. Okay, and just undo the change. And now we're going to try mapping to views directly. So whenever there is actually controller and then my own, I want to display student my own GSP page. So we have to create that my own GSP page, this guy, with this. Okay, so when we actually go to this control and my own, we just want to verify. If you click this guy, we just want to verify my own page gets displayed. Okay. Let's see, for your own exercise, create your own URL mapping that displays your own display page. Okay, so response code is that when there is a 4.4 error, instead of actually seeing the 4.4, the browser 4.4 message, we want to display errors not found view. So we're going to create our own, errors not found GSP page. Okay, and that will just display my own page not found, something like that. Okay, so that's what you are going to see. And named mapping. So here, named mapping, we're going to actually set as a student list. Okay, and basically that is reflecting this URL, and the control and action is this. Okay, so basically in our my own.jsp page, we are going to use that mapping. So when this is clicked, it's going to in fact use this URL. Okay, so you're going to see my list of students. Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you guys about the 10 minutes to try this exercise. Started. Next topic is filters. So filters are basically a reusable piece of code. It kind of works like interceptors, but it's reusable and can be used with multiple controllers, because you don't have to create it as part of the controller. It's actually a separate class. So filters can be applied to a bunch of controllers, or you could actually specify URI space to be filtered through these filters, or specific actions. So we're going to actually see how you could be configuring these things later on. It's far easier to apply and maintain than interceptors because the code, the filters are not tied up with a particular controller. It's useful for all sorts of cross-cutting concerns, such as security, logging, whatever. So whenever you need to do some extra thing, you can actually create it as a filter. So the way you can create a filter is pretty simple. You're going to create a class that ends with filters, and then you're going to place it under config directory. So if I want to create my filters, basically with a package of com.jpassion.com, as long as it's under conf directory and ends with the filters as a name, then that is considered as a filter. Okay. So you can actually create that filter by Grails, create filters, and then name of the filter and package. So com.jpassion is a package, name of the filter in this case my, right? And then it will create my filters.groovy file for you. So each filter you define within the filters block has a name and scope. So in this filters Groovy file, you can actually build, you can actually create multiple filters. So let's take a look at that. So this is example filters, and they are located under conf directory. It doesn't have a package. So here inside example filters class, you are going to have a property called the filters, and then you're going to have a closure being assigned to that filters property. And then here you are going to create multiple filters. So here I'm defining just one single filter. Okay. So here I'm creating a sample filter. And the sample filter will be applied to every controller because I'm using wildcard for controller, and it's going to apply to all the actions of all the controllers. So I'm using wildcard on both. Okay, and you can actually have a before filter, after filter, and after view filter. So before gets applied for every action is invoked. After filter is applied after action is invoked, and again it can actually receive a model as an argument. And after view is that this one could be actually executed after view is rendered. Or sometimes you want to actually after view is rendered, then you might want to maybe perform some cleanout operation and things like that. Okay, or it could actually receive an exception. Okay, so various conditions that you can specify in terms of where you want to apply that filter. So in this case, I'm applying that filter to all controller and all actions, star, wildcard. This one, I want to apply only a book controller, but all the actions of that book controller. This one, I'm actually setting invert, meaning all controllers except book controller. Okay. And here I'm applying all actions that contains save as an action name. Okay, so start, save, and start. So any action whose name happen to have save as part of its name. And action includes, so basically all actions starting with B except for actions beginning with phrase bad. Okay. This one is applied to URI space. So this is the URI space based filter. So basically any URL that has a book and then anything after else, it will be applied. This filter will be applied. And this one basically applied to all URIs, root and star. This is an example of security check filter. So here basically uses the before filter to execute a block of code that checks if a user is in the session, or if not, if the user is not in session, that means user has not been logged in, In that case, it's going to redirect to login action. So this is actually a way of checking whether user has in fact logged in or not. Okay, so if you take a look at the security filters, we have a filters, and inside we have a single filter called login check. And we're going to actually apply this one to all actions of all controllers, and we're going to actually apply for before action, and we are just checking whether session user is not null or not. If it is null, then means the user has not logged in, or actual action name that equal. So as long as it's not login, then we are going to allow it. But if it is a login, then we certainly want the user to log in. Okay, so let me just reinterpret this statement again. So so in this case, we want to redirect login because this is the checking whether user has not logged in. So this is the condition. If it is true, that means user has not logged in. So in this case, session.user is null, and action name is not logging. Action name equals login. Oh, right, yeah. So yeah, so if the action name is not logging in, then we are going to redirect. Okay, moving forward. So that's exercise 2. So that is we're gonna actually create a very simple log filter. So you are going to create under config, new, and you're gonna create the Groovy class. And you're going to name it as log filters, and then package name is going to be com.jpassion, whatever package name of your choice. And here in this filter, we are going to have my log filter, and we're going to apply to all actions of all controllers. And basically, we have a before filter, after view filter, and basically we are just doing a logging. In this case, if it is a model, we're going to display the model values. And if there is an exception, we want to display an exception as well. Okay, so we have that, and then we are going to modify config.groovy file. So this is where you can, configure your log4j configuration. Okay, so if you work with Spring Framework or Java EE application, sometimes you want to configure log4j, right? For example, like a Panda, you can actually configure your log of Panda. And here, this is the pattern that you want to display your log information, right? And then we are going to say debug. So this is the this package. Anytime this package is being accessed, we want to set the debug log level. Okay. So everything else is error level, but for this package, we want to set it as a debug level so that we can actually see this log message. Okay, so once you have done that, you are going to restart the application, and if you perform some operations, then you should see these log filters messages in your console. Okay. All right, if you again see this one, just restart the application. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes to try exercise 2. Next topic is Webflow. So let's talk about the concept of Webflow a bit for those people who are not familiar with the Webflow concept. So in traditional web application, the UI flows are managed programmatically. So the problem is that it's hard to maintain and hard to reuse. Even in Grails application, basically the way that you are going to select a view is actually by returning by returning in a sense the view information implicitly or explicitly. So if you want to actually change a view, then you have to actually go and change the code, right? So that is rather hard to maintain and hard to reuse. And in many cases, the flow of UIs are kind of common. For example, many applications have concept of reservation flow, right? So whether that is actually airline reservation application or book reservation application or the hotel reservation applications, they have this concept of reservation flow. So idea is that why can we actually capture that UI flow so that it could be usable in multiple applications? So that is basically idea of Webflow. So in Spring Framework, that Webflow is captured in the form of XML5, okay? And of course, in Grails application, that Webflow is going to be in the form of Groovy code, right? Okay. So Groovy Webflow is built on the top of Spring Webflow, but it's using Groovy. And so Spring Webflow, as I said, flow definition language is used to define a flow declaratively. And so idea of that is that we want to capture that navigation logic into a separate file from the presentation logic, so that that logic could be used in many applications. So that is also easy to maintain and change if you want to change the navigation logic. For example, if the user click this button, we want to go to a different page and things like that. Without using Webflow, you have to again go and change the code But if you're using Spring Webflow, it's a matter of actually changing XML file. Okay, so there is no code change. Again, in the Spring Grails Webflow, it's a matter of actually changing this Webflow file. And again, it's reusable in multiple applications. So what is a flow? So basically it's a conversation. So, this is the hotel site search criteria, and then you specify search criteria, and then you got search result, and then you're going to choose a hotel or something like that. Okay. And this kind of flow could be used in many applications. Another example is multi-page registration. So suppose if you are building an application where a user has to enter his or her registration information, and if that information is actually huge, suppose you have to collect 50 different items, you can actually ask the user to enter those 50 items in a single page, right? So in that case, you want to have a series of pages, okay? And now when you have this series of pages, each of those pages is going to be in a form of different request and response cycle. You want to have some kind of the flow scope. Flow scope in a sense that those set of request and response cycles should be captured as a flow. So whatever state in that flow will be available in those request and response cycles. But once the flow is done, you want to actually clear things out. So in a sense, this is actually, the flow scope is smaller than session scope, but is greater than request scope. Okay, so other web application frameworks provide this kind of flow concept these days. So pretty much all modern, in fact, frameworks provide this flow concept. Another thing is that when you are, in fact, in that flow, so multi-registration page, you want the user to be able to go back and forth by pressing backward button and forward button, and you want to have the information to be available. So if the user, so why don't I actually, give a demonstration. So this is actually hands-on lab that you're going to do. So basically, this is the contact application, okay? We want a user to be able to enter multiple pages in terms of, this is actually user is going to actually enter name. Then user is going to enter, so probably I have to enter first. Okay, so Sang and last name. And then next page, we want to a user to be able to enter address information. So address, whatever, state, and something like this. And then go text, okay? And then phone. Now, if I actually go to the previous page, it should actually maintain the state, because now I'm in the flow scope. So as long as I'm in this flow scope, any information that I have entered should be captured in that flow scope. Okay, so now I'm going to actually enter phone number and email, something like this. Okay, and now go to next, and now the flow is finished. Okay, so so if I click finish, it's finished. Okay, but I guess this is, as long as it's not finished, I should actually go back previous slide or the next pages. So this is another example of using a flow when you happen to have multiple pages to be displayed to user to enter information, and you want to capture those information in a flow. So if I now click finish, now it's finished. Oh, okay, so this is, I probably didn't provide the list, the JSP page. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so hopefully you got the idea. Okay, so now let's move on to the presentation. So makeup of a typical flow. So how are we going to create a flow? Okay, so flow consists of a series of steps called the states. Okay, and there is also, of course, there is a start state and end state. Okay, the start state typically results in a view being displayed or performs action if an action is defined. So basically, you can think of start state is like a page, view page, like a GSP page. Okay, on that view, user is gonna take some actions, maybe enter some forms and then click a button or click a link. So those are captured as user events. So on a view, user events occur and that are handled by the state. and those events can trigger transitions to other states. So the clicking a button or clicking a link will transition to another state, okay, which result in another view display, and that's keep going until it ends. Okay, so creating a flow in Grails. The way you are going to create a flow, the way you are going to do, let me actually repeat. The way you are going to create a flow in Grails is you are going to create a regular Grails controller and add an action that ends with the convention of flow. So basically, in your controller, in order to create a flow, basically you're going to actually name it as flow. So in this case, shopping cart, and I named it as flow. So this is considered as a flow action. So this is a regular action, right? And this is a flow action. So in a regular action, if you redirect to shopping cart, the first thing Grails framework will do is whether there is in fact a flow that can handle this action. If there is no flow, then it will try to find a regular action. If there is a flow that can handle it, in this case shopping cart, then it will enter flow into that flow. Okay, so this is the way that you are going to create a flow in Grails. Basically, action that ends with flow. Okay. So flow has a defined start and end state. Okay, so as I said, a start state is a state which is entered when a user first initiates a conversation. So in our case, if we take a look at this flow, that is in fact the start state. Okay, so the first state is in fact the start state. Okay, and the start state of the Grails flow is typically the first method call that takes the block. Okay. So let's actually take a look at an example. So this is an example of shopping cart flow. Okay. So basically, the first method, this is the starting state. So the start state of the flow, since the shortcut state doesn't define an action or redirect, it's assumed to be a view state. So typically, it's going to be a view state and refers to this page, showcart.gsp page. So when showcart.gsp page gets displayed, there could be some actions. So checkout action, checkout event, or continue shopping event. Okay, so we're going to actually take a look at this showcart.gsp page in the following slide, and you are going to see, how this checkout event and continue shopping event is going to be specified. So when checkout event occurs, then we are going to go to display invoice state. So in this case, it's going to go to display invoice method, and that is basically end of it. Okay, and if the user interaction occurs with a continuous shopping event, then it's going to go to display catalog state. Okay, so again, this is typically a view. So it's going to be display invoice.gsp page. Okay. And then if redirection occurs, then it will actually redirect to catalog and show. So it's going to go to a show action of catalog controller. Okay. Okay, so view state is one that doesn't define an action or redirect. So again, so this is enter person details. If there is no action of this, then this is considered as a view. So basically, it's going to display enter person details.gsp by default. Okay, and there could be submit event or return event, and it will go to a different state. Okay, so action state is a state that executes code but does not render a view. So the result of an action is used to dictate the flow transition. So this is an action. So to create an action state, you define an action to be executed. This is done by calling action method and passing it a block of code to be executed. So basically, you say action, and then you are going to perform some business logic and then return. Okay. So when that action is returned, that could be either success or exception. So if it is a success, then you go to show catalog state. If it is exception, and then it goes to handle error state. Okay. Transition. So transition is again depending on what happens. So in enter person details view page, if there is the submit the event, it will go to, it will do this, and then it goes to enter shopping state. If there is a return event, it goes to shortcut state. Okay, so this is actually how this these events are related in the view page. Okay, so here we have a shop cart view page. So that shop cart view page is like this. This is the form, and there is the checkout button and continue shopping button. So it's going to use this name of the buttons as events. So if the user in fact click checkout button, that will be considered as a checkout event in this flow. And then it goes to enter personal details, the state. And if the user click continue shopping the button, then that's considered as continue shopping event here, and it goes to display catalog state. Okay, so let's do exercise 3. So I'm going to actually demo. Yeah, basically what we are going to do is in fact build this application. We are going to actually build the contact application, so that a user is going to enter multiple information in different pages in flow scope. Okay, so let me just So this application is available on the samples, but it is actually built with Grails 2.4.2. So I had to configure this one with when I actually run it. When I import it, I have to set 2.4.2. Okay, so you can actually build the 2.4.3 step by step, or you can actually install Grails 2.4.2 and import it here and just run it and see what happens. Okay, so let me actually introduce the code. Okay, so we are going to create the Grails project called the Webflow Contact Application. Okay, and then we are going to create a domain class called the com.jpassion.contact. Okay. And we are going to modify that contact domain class. As you can see, we have lots of information. So we have only, let's say, 9 properties, but imagine we could have like 50 different properties, and it's impossible to display all these things in a single page. So we in fact simulate 3 different pages to get the name information, address information, and the communication information, phone and email. Okay, so we have these 9 properties, and we have some constraints, blank false and nullable false, and the size and things like that. Okay. And then we have to actually configure Webflow, because Webflow does not come with the Grails by default. Okay, so you have to go to build.config.groovy file, and then you have to configure this Webflow. So tomorrow, maybe we have time. If you have time, we can actually talk about how to create your plugin. Basically, Grails is a collection of plugins. All the new features are in fact provided in a form of a plugin. So, for example, scaffolding is provided in a form of a plugin. Database migration or Hibernate, everything is in a form of a plugin. So this is really nice architecture in a way that you can extend the platform by just adding new plugins. Okay, so Webflow has to be included as a plugin. So you just add this one at the end of the file. Okay, under plugins. Okay, and then we are going to create a controller for this domain class. Okay, and then in that domain class we are going to create a flow. So we're going to actually create what is called the build flow. Okay, so again, it's very important that you name it with flow extension. Okay, so that's the way it figures. Grails figures it is a flow. Okay, so we are going to start with the enter. Okay, so in this case, this is action state, so it adds an action, so it will actually create the contact object. Okay, and then it actually save into contact attribute of the flow scope object. So this flow is a scope object that is available right away. Okay, so Grails framework provides this flow scope object, and you're basically setting a key value pair. So name of the key is a contact, and the actual contact object is set as a value. Okay. All right, and then we have event. So so yeah, I'm kind of confused what this is all about. Let's see. So when contact domain object gets created successfully, go to name state, which has name GSP view. Oh, okay. So yeah, okay. So I'm not sure exactly what this is. Oh, okay. So in this case, what is this is a flow contact, the scope object, this guy. We are just assigning to, the contact property here. So the key point is that, when this action is successful, we want to go to name state. So we have a name state. So this name state, because it's not containing any action, this must be a view. Okay. So we must have a name.jsp page. Okay. So if you actually take a look at the this application, there should be name.jsp page. Go to view and context, build. Yeah, so there is a name.jsp page. Okay. So this name.jsp page should have the next button. So there should be some next as captured as an event. So so here we go. Next button is called the name and cancel. So we have a the event. Okay. So when user click next, what we're gonna do is we are going to create. So we're gonna talk about the concept of command object. Okay. It's receiving build contact name command object. So basically, whatever you captured in here, these two, first name and last name, will be captured as this command object called the build contact name command object. Okay. And if there is any errors, then you do something, and then we're gonna actually bind this command object to flow contract. So basically, we are using this command object to set up the contact, contact object. So basically filling up just first and last name. Okay. And then we go to address state. If it is a cancel, then we go to finish. So let's go to address now. So this is the one that captures now the address information. It's actually pretty much the same logic here. So we have a logic for capturing the first name and last name, and we have a logic for capturing address information, and then we have the electronic. This is the state that captures electronic information, and then finally we have a complete. So in complete, when you just say next, it will try to save it, and then it goes to finish. Okay, and the finish is basically just redirecting to list action of contract, so it gets out of the flow. Okay, so that is the flow definition, and then we have to actually have this build contact name command object, and this one has just first name and last name. Okay, and this one is the address command object, and then electronics command object. Okay, and then we have to add some views. Okay, so it's going to be on the build, the views contract controller and build. Okay, so you can just copy this code. Okay, it's basically reflecting this. Okay, so address.jsp page, and then electronics.jsp page, and then complete.jsp page, and then error.jsp page. If there is an error, then it will actually get displayed. Okay, and then you run the application, and basically this is the first page, and this is the second page, and this is the third page, and then we are going to finish. Okay, and now let's do the validation. So you go to next, and it will just display those fields cannot be blank. Okay, so validation error. Okay. All right. Let me actually finish up the presentation because right now it's actually 4:16, and I'll let you guys actually go and do the lab work on your own. So let's talk about the command object. So we have seen the example of command object, right? So what is command object? So sometimes you want to capture a subset of the domain class into an object. So that's when you want to use a command object with a validation. Okay, so when the user enters, so in this case, when the user enters first name and last name, we cannot create the contact domain object from this because it's not complete, right? Yet we want to be able to perform validation. Okay, so that's when you want to create a command object. So you are going to capture this information as a command object, but with some validation. Okay, because if you take a look at the this command object, so if you take a look at the let's take a look at the what is a command object? If you see this command object, like name command object here, okay, we can still specify the validation, right? Okay, but it is not domain object because it just have a first name and last name. So that is a command object. So just going back to presentation, sometimes an action does not use the domain class, but still requires validation of user input. Like a domain class fields and incoming requests do not match. So this certainly do not match to contact the domain class. Okay, so command object is a class that has data binding and the data validation capabilities. Yeah, so that's something I didn't mention, data binding. Okay, so conversion of the type conversion and all that stuff also happens. So validation and data binding capability, but does not match with the domain class. Okay, so that's when you want to create the command object. So a class is only considered to be a command object when it is used as a parameter of an action. So so it's going to be used. If you take a look at the controller, it's going to receive this build contact name object as an argument. Okay. So declaring a command object. So basically, you say login command. It has the username and password, and you can specify the validation. Okay. Using command object. So basically, in your action, you're going to receive it as a command object. Okay, so let's take a look at the exercise 4. So here, command object. So we have a form, and we're going to actually call save with command object. Okay, so and the command object is the student command. So it basically captures name and age. Okay. And then in our controller action, save with the command object. So we're going to receive just the student command object. And we can verify whether the data binding has been successful, then we create a student object and we bind the data with a student instance, okay, with a command, and we basically performing so in this case. The student command and student object is probably the same, but when you call the bind data, we are filling the fields of this command object into the actual domain class object, in this case student instance. Okay, probably not the best example here. So save with command object. Why is looks like this duplication. I should actually remove this guy. All right, so create and student, Okay, so let me actually finish up the rest of it. Miscellaneous features. So logging. So every controller has a built-in log property. So you can just use log.info, log.debug, log.one, log.info, and log.debug and things like that. Okay. And HTTP method restrictions. So it basically restricts some actions only to certain HTTP request method, and this could be useful for RESTful-based operations. Okay, so in this case, this save action can be only performed when HTTP request method is a post. That makes sense, right? Okay. Same thing with the update. Same thing with the delete. Right. So if there is actually the HTTP request, which is get and trying to call save, that is not allowed. Handle duplicate form submissions. So Grails has a built-in support for handling duplicate form submissions using synchronizer token patterns. So you can actually use this use token equals true, and then in your controller you can handle it. So this is a good request and this is a bad request. Okay, this might actually handle that double submit issue that we talked about when the user is refresh the page. It might actually send another form request. Okay, if this it can be checked by this one as well, or the user might in fact just keep pressing it, because it didn't receive the response from the user, something like that. Okay, if the network is slow, it's a typical behavior, or user just keep pressing the submit button multiple times, right? So it might actually send the request multiple times, and the server should be able to actually detect whether that is in fact a good request or duplicate request and things like that. Okay, so those are miscellaneous exercises. I'm going to actually let you do logging and HTTP method restrictions. It's pretty straightforward, so nothing really complicated. Okay. All right, so I am going to finish.